In recent years, we've gotten used to seeing some of the heavyweights from the technology industry make their way to Washington, testify in front of lawmakers. Think of leaders like Mark Zuckerberg answering questions about the influence of Facebook and the other platforms that Facebook controls. Well, Jeff Bezos is a tech leader we talk a lot about, but we haven't seen him grilled by lawmakers before, even though he spends a lot of time in Washington. But that looks like it could change. The company now signaling that he will be made available to answer questions about the rise of that company. Let's get some more perspective on that developing story. Bruce Croxon of Round 13 Capital joining us to talk tech, as always. Bruce, give us a sense, like if we see Jeff Bezos answering lawmaker questions, what do you think some of those questions might be?
Well, I think what's sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of making sure that he showed up was a recent story and, revealing practices that they've sort of been Amazon's kind of been looking over the fence at some of the data of the companies that are selling products through their network and are picking off the best and the brightest based on consumer habits, which you could argue very strongly is anti-competitive and antitrust. So I think that's part of it, a big part of it. And I'm of two minds on that because this is a practice that's been going on for years if you think about it. You go into a Loblaws and you've got a branded product there. They didn't just come up with the product based on pulling, on a whim. They knew what their consumer habits were, and they put up white label products to take advantage of what they knew about their own customers. Having said that, this is big. I mean, they control an incredible bandwidth of products and services. They control the distribution, and it's getting increasingly difficult if you're a small merchant to avoid the Shopify network if you want to be successful.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about Shopify. I guess at the end of the day, Amazon is so big and gets so complicated that sometimes we forget that there could be multiple antitrust concerns. I mean, on the one hand, they've got this massive e-commerce business, but there was even an analyst, Bruce, at Needham this morning. They raised the price target on the shares. Why? Because they think there are other parts of the business that aren't getting as much love. I mean, they've got the big cloud business, which you could argue they are dominant in that already, but they also got a massive media business. They've got Amazon Prime, and they've got a huge advertising empire that's been building, and they have Twitch. So, I mean, I guess this is all just a reminder of how big this company is, and sometimes it feels like that growth has been unchecked.
Yeah, and I think that's about to come to an end. Whether it's enough to put a serious dent in their global dominance, obviously this analyst this morning didn't think so as he raises the price. But this legislation and pending governance, if you will, has been hanging over the large tech stocks for a while now. And as we can see and have seen during the pandemic, there's been very little impact on their share value. And in fact, as we've all transitioned to work from home and shifted our behavior, cloud computing included, you mentioned their cloud business, everything has prospered. So it'll be a very interesting next year to see whether any of this puts a dent in, their share price and their growth.
So you mentioned Shopify. Let's talk a little bit more about Shopify, which is obviously the stock market darling here in Canada this year. Then we announced this high-profile partnership with Walmart. Bruce, you've been covering this company for so many years. I wonder, do you feel like other retailers? It's funny to think about Walmart as the little guy, but do you feel like retailers who are frustrated by the rapid rise of Amazon and looking for their own buddy, a sort of a buddy system to battle back, that Shopify ends up fitting that role for some of these companies?
100%. It's a multifaceted story. You mentioned Walmart. It's funny to think of them as the little guy, but against Amazon, particularly in the area of e-commerce, they are the little guy. And this is a way to fight back. The real winner in all of this is the hundreds of thousands of merchants that are on Shopify that all of a sudden got a boon to their distribution networks through the Walmart network and through a recently announced partnership with Facebook, same kind of thing. They're now exposed to an audience that arguably they may not have been exposed to before. From Walmart's perspective, they've added a ton of inventory, notional inventory, because they don't have to buy it. It's not sitting on their shelf, that they've been able to expose to their networks, taking margin and having the companies themselves pick up the shipping. And from Shopify's point of view, all of this flows back to a very important revenue source for them, an increasing revenue source, which is the payment channel. So it's sort of a win-win-win all the way around. And yes, in answer to your original point, it is a way for retailers to fight back on the you can't argue against how big the competitive threat of Amazon really is.
Yeah. Hey, Bruce, before we let you go, we just did this inflation data, and our guest was talking about how when we try to measure consumer behavior in this country, that maybe we're a little dated on that front. Like when we measure the stats, we're missing the phenomenon that is e-commerce growth. I mean, that's an area you know very well. What do you take? Have we not fully captured how quickly that transformation is happening in this country, in your opinion?
Well, I think we capture it. I think we capture it a little bit late. It's always a lagging indicator. As far as inflation goes, it's very interesting because, I spend 99% of my time surrounded by technology that is taking costs out of the system. And, for inflation to take hold, you need prices and costs to rise. When you have Walmart launching distribution and Amazon through their size taking the cost out of me getting a good, that's why inflation's staying as low as it is, and that's why I think, John, in the foreseeable future, I don't see a situation where interest rates are going to have to rise to combat this inflation, which I think is, really the only real piece of good news we have as the economy sort of sputters and tries to get back to life.
Yeah, all really interesting stuff. Hey, Bruce, thanks as always. Bruce Croxon of Round 13 Capital joining us with some of the headlines in the world of technology this morning.